Trauma Therapist Podcast Plus listeners can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now. Become a Plus listener by going to Apple Podcasts, searching for the Trauma Therapist Podcast, and signing up today. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who've experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Our folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited today to have as my guest today, Amy Stark. Amy, welcome.
Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. So Amy is a former science teacher, now a certified energy practitioner who bridges the divide between science and spirit. She channels her extraordinary abilities to demonstrate the unseen and shares a wisdom and knowledge she's cultivated over the past 2 decades, helping people to heal their mind, body, and spirit. As a host of the Stark Transformation Show, Amy has shared her message of hope, healing, and transformation with a global audience, catalyzing transformations worldwide. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get going here, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
So I am from New Jersey. It's a small town, and now I live in Colorado.
Nice. All right. I used to live in Jersey. I'm from New York originally, lived in the tri-state area. And I'm just noticing that's what is that, a microscope behind you?
It is a microscope.
Wow.
Right there, yeah.
We'll get into that.
Okay.
All right. So how did all this start for you? Energy, transformations, abilities? How did this start?
So I was teaching in New York City, actually. I was part of the New York City Teaching Fellows, where I became a teacher at a school where these students were classified with emotional disturbances. And in order to fill the school with teachers, they gave you like a little stipend towards your education. And so you're basically risking your life to work there. And after 4 years, my nervous system was shot. Like, I already grew up chronically ill. I already had some perfectionist tendencies and things like that. And after having my life threatened, and these kids just being really rough, like in a rough neighborhood, a rough school, still living in New York City. It was a lot for me. So I actually had to leave, unfortunately. And I was like, so what do I do now? Like, I was just getting sick all the time. I was unhappy. I almost took my life. I mean, I got to the breaking point. Yeah.
Wow.
And somebody said, why don't you try meditation? And I was too proud to be like, I can't do that. So I was like, come on, see, if I sit on the couch for 15 minutes with a cup of coffee, like, what's going to happen? Just close your eyes. So I was like, I can't tell her that I couldn't do it. And I was an athlete for 25 years. So I was like, or whatever, 20 years at the time. And I was like, I have to be able to do this. So I did. And then I enjoyed it. And I didn't expect to, because, I was used to that go, go, go. I was used to being a doing kind of person. And here I was doing basically nothing. But I really was doing a lot. And I wound up opening up a bunch of gifts, which I wasn't expecting, because I was a science teacher and I just found meditation because I was so stressed out. And then all of a sudden I started knowing things. I started seeing energy. I started feeling things. And I have a really cool story, actually. So I was sitting there meditating, and this was really when I knew something was going on. I was sitting there meditating, and I had my eyes closed, and I started to think about my twin sister. And all of a sudden, my eyes started burning. So I thought, wow, that's really weird. So I opened my eyes, and my eyes were fine. I closed my eyes, and they started burning again. And I was like, so I opened them again. I'm like, am I okay? And I was like, what was the last thing I was thinking of? And it was my twin sister. So I was like, let me give her a call and find out how she's doing. So I was like, hey, Sarah, how are you doing? And she's like, oh, did mom tell you I have a double pink eye infection? And I was like, what the heck? So that was weird. And I was like, well, twin tuition, maybe, and then the next day I was meditating, and I thought of my dad, and then my tooth started hurting. And I was like, wait a second, let me find out if my dad's tooth is hurting him. So I call my mom, and I'm like, hey, mom, how's dad doing? She's like, oh, he's at the dentist right now. Last night he bit down on a walnut and broke his tooth. So I was like, something is happening here. I'm picking up on some sort of information, not meaning to, and it's completely transforming how I see the world now. So like I need to know more. So I started doing more research and diving into the science behind, what I was experiencing.
Wow. So
Yeah.
are you describing yourself as like an empath?
Yes. So yeah, very, very sensitive empath. So yes, I wound up opening up gifts for being a psychic medium. And then of course I do energy healing. I wrap it all in together to be able to help people to heal their trauma.
So let me just kind of go back a little bit. So you
Sure.
have this very intense, scary,
Hmm.
life-threatening, it sounds like suicidal inducing, almost ideation inducing experience at the school. You start to meditate and things shift. Take us back to that. When you said you sat down and things started happening, what started happening for you? How did it happen?
Well, so first it was very simple. It was just I felt better, right? And so I was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. If I feel better and things are going in the right direction, maybe it's going to work. So I started meditating for 15 minutes like I said, and then I worked my way very quickly up to 2 hours.
What type of
So
meditation were you doing, Amy?
all I did was put music in and I breathed with the music and I just paid attention to my thoughts. And, sometimes lights or energy would be in front of my eyes. I would see like some color changes and things like that. Um, and then eventually that's when I started, connecting with people by accident, through meditation, like I just said about my sister. And that's when I really started being like, okay, I got to start listening to my thoughts, which I found out were very boring and very repetitive and very negative, which was really important and good information for me. So I wound up sorting through those things and I just started doing things about the things I was thinking about. So it was a very long process of reprogramming my brain, which I later found out there's a better process, which is called EFT, which I teach now.
Wow. So it sounds like from what you were saying, you were this prior to meditating and maybe even post meditating, you were this go getter.
Oh,
And
yeah.
meditation allows you just to slow down, excuse me, and kind of, like you said, open up these abilities. How do you know that these are abilities and period, and not just whatever momentary experiences?
Well, they were happening very frequently. And it really was like the gamut of things. So first, after those things, like a spirit came to visit me and actually delivered information that I shouldn't have known. Another thing that happened was I was able to, for a friend of mine, she was like, "Oh, I'm interested in getting some real estate, and can you help me out with it? Like, what do you see?" And I was able to walk her through every single thing that was about to happen, which was pretty amazing. So there was enough definitive information that was coming to me that I knew was accurate, that I was like, there's something happening here. And so, when you do the research, you find out that we're made up of 57 trillion cells, and those cells all communicate with each other through energy. So we're basically an antenna. And the things that mess up that antenna are trauma. So, and trauma can look like a toxin, or it can look like an emotion, or it could look like a physical injury that happens to our body. So, when, I started to go down the path of like, okay, so if this is energy that I'm experiencing, what is energy healing? And then I started taking something called Reiki, which is, just, you have your hands over somebody's body. And I
Mhm.
took, different levels of that. And then I took another class. And then I started really seeing how I could influence the body in terms of healing based on the information I was being given. So here's where it gets really cool. So as I'm working on somebody's body, for instance, the energy would be kind of thick if there was an injury or if there was something there, like an emotion that was stuck. So if I started to communicate with that energy, meaning I just listened to what the story it was telling, that's all it is. And as soon as I acknowledged it and helped move it out, it would leave and the person wouldn't have pain anymore. So that's when I started to realize that there was now energy that was stuck in the body that needed to
Mhm.
move. and it completely transformed how they felt. So like people who went to multiple people to try to fix something, whether it was a chiropractor or, physical therapy doctor or whatever, it wouldn't get fixed, but they would come to me and then I'd move this energy and then they could go for a run the next day. Like, and that was happening repeatedly. Like I was in a coffee shop with this lady who I knew very well, and she wound up hurting her back early in the morning. I walked in and she couldn't even stand up. I said, "Are you okay? Like, come back up to my apartment. I'll help you out. We'll get you back on your feet." Sure enough, she was able to walk right back down and she was able to continue on her day. So like there was enough instances of these things that I had to believe what was happening in front of me.
Prior to this, and how long ago are we talking here?
Oh, I've been doing this for 17 years.
Okay. So
Yeah.
prior to the meditation, were these ideas and concepts on your radar?
No, not at all.
Were you
No.
like, yeah, energy, of course, this is happening?
No. So ironically, in college, I was teaching a physics class and we had this discussion with the students because I was one of the TAs. And we were talking about how psychics were full of, what. And I actually was there saying that just a couple of years before. So I was definitely a huge skeptic, didn't believe in any of this stuff. I grew up chronically ill. So one of the things that I noticed, though, the more that I stepped into this realm and I started to heal myself like through meditation. And then I gravitated towards like healthier options just naturally. I became much healthier. And in fact, so like when I was 9 years old, my doctor said he wished he could take my immune system out and replace it with a new one. I had a lot of childhood trauma. We'll just talk about that. But he said that to me and I felt so powerless because I'm like, well, you can't do that. So like, what am I going to do? I'm going to be sick for the rest of my life. And by the time I was 26, I realized like, I don't want to be the kind of person that takes medicine for the rest of my life. Like I can't be dependent on this. I don't know if I'll have insurance and things like that be able to get it, blah, blah, blah. So I started looking at other options and energy was one of them. And like I said, you naturally started gravitating towards the things that are good for you. And now I was 41 when I got the test done. My immune system was 13 years younger than what I was chronologically. So I was 41 years old, but my immune system was 28. So like healing the childhood trauma, healing the signal of my body in various ways by eating healthier, by, healing the trauma, creating a stronger signal, you naturally get healthier and happier.
At what point and how did you decide you were going to begin working with other people, helping other people?
Yeah. So around 2010, I left my job. So I was 4 years in of like playing with this energy, seeing a few clients on the weekends, really doing a lot of research, feeling very confident to leave and study it further, and then offer it, full time. Yeah. So it's been, what is that? 2010 to 14 years ago.
So you mentioned the word psychic. Do you consider yourself a psychic?
Yes.
Or how is that defined?
Well, so here's the thing. I am not the kind of psychic that will predict the future. I think that's a waste of time because there's infinite futures. It all depends on the choices that you make today, right? Mm-hmm. So what I help clients do is to make the choices that are in most alignment with them by removing the trauma that they have in their body, because trauma becomes a lens in which you see the world. And if you can go back or use a tool to go back in time to help release this trauma within the person, they will then, make different choices and show up differently in the world. Right. Mm-hmm. So here's an example. One time I was working with a client and I use this technique called EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. Many people are familiar with it in your field. Though I think more people should be well aware of it, because it's very transformative and very healing and very helpful, because what it does is it retrains the nervous system, based on the trauma that you had. So normally we talk about the trauma, right, in talk therapy, but the missing component is retraining the nervous system and the brain to see the incident differently, because the trauma that happened to you is not necessarily going to happen again, especially if it happened when you were younger. You have much more tools, you're older, you don't care about what your parents think, blah, blah, blah. So this tool helps you go back in time essentially by releasing any of the trapped emotions. The body keeps the score through something called tapping. So you tap on the body and you talk about it. And there was this one woman I was working with, and she never felt really worthy. And we were tapping and talking. And as we went backwards, I noticed that there was an incident when she was a young child around 4, where she wanted to be up at the counter cooking with her mom. And her mom thought, oh, this will be much easier if I bring everything to the floor. So I'll put a blanket down and I'll make it easy for you to do the cooking on the floor. And all she thought in her head was, how come I'm not good enough to be up at the counter? Now, that's a small T. Like, we talk about little trauma, big trauma.
Right.
So that's a little T that happens, but that becomes a lens in which she sees the world. And so when she doesn't get picked for the gym team, for instance, a gym, we have to get the select teams and whatever. She's like, oh, I know, I'm not worthy of being with them. So you start to develop this thing where you see the world in a particular way. And so like when she's 45 years old and it's time for her to go for the promotion, she shows up as if she's not worthy of it. Yep. So she shows up in a different way than she would like to. So I help people go all the way back, find that trauma, kind of pull it out by the root, and it changes the course of their life and they show up differently because
it's a really good
finally
example.
Healed.
Yeah, that's a really good example because it is what could be perceived as a small, insignificant thing, right? Your mother put all this stuff on the floor, big deal, but it impacted her.
Right.
And that's the thing here. And not only that, but it impacted a lot of different things. I mean, I can totally relate to that. So when people come to you, what do you do? How do you work with them? When they first step into your office, this is different, right? Because you're working with energy. Do you just automatically like tune in and feel? What do you do?
Yes. So my body is my instrument, right? So I do lots of things behind the scenes to keep my energy really high, to keep it clear. I've worked, like I said, I've worked on my trauma. I've, obviously healed myself. 2 years ago, I went into a laboratory, proved my energetic healing abilities, was able to change the structure of water, breaking laws of physics with it, like crazy stuff, right? So like I am not your average person who is doing this, right? So when people come to me, my energetic frequency is very high. So that's just to start off. And then I can channel a lot of information because of that. So the person who's sitting across from me comes to me and says, well, usually they're like, somebody told me I have to see you. And then what I do is I don't even ask them what they're working on usually, because to me, it doesn't much matter because like we were just saying in that particular example, they're not usually going to say, my mom made me sit on the floor, right? But they think they know they have a worthiness issue, or they're not getting the job that they want, or they're not showing up in ways that they think is in alignment with them. So, that's how I approach it. So I actually talk to their higher self. So their more evolved self, if you will. And I say, okay, what is the real thing that we need to fix here that's going to fix these multitude of things, right? Because it could be a worthiness issue. It could be my mom didn't listen to me. Nobody hears what I say or what I ask for. It can be a lot of different things. So, and that usually bleeds out into, not just their job, but how they're showing up in their relationship, maybe with their kids, just in general. So I would rather have less information and go off of what their energetic body is guiding me to do. So I will get the stories and we'll start using this technique, like I said, to tap on the different points of the body to release the energy and rewrite and reprogram their body and brain. And when we release that trauma, I'll tell you something very interesting. When that trauma finally leaves, their original energetic signature comes into their body, fills their body, and they can't even remember why they wouldn't have gone after that job, or they can't remember or find the energy of why they would ever feel unworthy. They just have a knowingness. And that is not something I can tell somebody. They have to experience it for themselves.
You said when you meet someone, when they come into your office, you kind of talk to their higher selves. Is that literally talking to their higher selves?
It's
How
all
does that happen?
communication, telepathy. Yeah. I'm not
Okay.
actually like sitting there talking. I actually do it
Okay.
before they get into the office. And then I discuss with them what I found and what I believe we're working on. I say, does that sound right to you? And they'll be like, yes, that's exactly what we're
So you mean
working
you're
with.
sitting with them in silence in a sense, just being with them?
No. So, but prior to 15 minutes before, I tune in, I meditate, I get the
I see.
information, I figure out the program we're rewriting or the programs. I figure out where it came from in their family lineage. Maybe mom acted this way, they learned it from mom. We thank mom usually or dad, wherever it came from, because it was helpful information to get them to this point because they're still alive, right? That's the whole point of the brain
Mhm.
is to keep us alive. But at this point, we'd like to change the story, like flip the script, have a new trajectory. So we thank the past and then we can move forward.
What was it like when you first started doing this type of work?
It was a lot of oh my gosh, what is this? It was like I would see stuff and then it would be validated in a book that I would find. I'd be like, oh, that's why I do that. And it still to this day happens. Even as of a few minutes ago, I was like, oh, yeah, that's why I see all this energy back here and the brain leaving. What was I looking up? Shoot, now I can't remember. But every day I still make these connections because I um I just go off of what their body is asking for help with. So, if you dive deeper into this stuff, there's really some easy things to look at, like because it all comes down to your nervous system. It comes down to the chemicals that are being released within the body. So you're either going to be healing or you're going to be fighting, fleeing, fight, flight,
Mm,
freeze, all that stuff. And that creates a cocktail within your body, or you could be healing, right? So what I do is that I'm doing is helping people to get back into the parasympathetic nervous system. I'm helping them to release these chemicals throughout their body that naturally heals them. So as people see the world differently, they show up differently and they get healthier and happier
mhm.
because they're not in fight or flight anymore or as much.
This is really interesting to me. How would you say this kind of differs in contrast between other modalities, other somatic modalities, maybe?
So what I love about EFT is that you can do it anywhere at any time. So I'm grateful for that because not only do I use it when I need it, like as a mom on the go, like one time my son didn't get off the bus and I was freaking out. He was 5 years old. He happened to go to his cooking class and he was fine. But my kid's missing and he's 5. I'm scared he might have got off somewhere in the entire city. So I also have to go and take my dog to the vet. So I'm like, I grab my dog, I get into the car, I go down to the school, and I find him. Now my brain says he's fine, you have him, but my body is still freaking out because that's just a
Mhm.
primal instinct, right? So all of a sudden, I'm trying to connect my brain and my body. And the point that really helps with that is right underneath the nose. And I was able to calm myself down. So I was able to tell the vet what was wrong with my dog because my dog can't tell him, So I have to be in my thinking brain rather than my reptilian brain, right? So this is a great tool that you can do at any time. And I was just at the stoplights, tapping, and my son's laughing in the backseat. He knows tapping, and he was like, "I'm fine. I'm right here." I'm like, "I know that. That's the problem. Is like my brain knows that, but my body doesn't remember that yet, or know that yet." So I also my clients sometimes, they're very ill and they might be going through some emotional things and, it'll be midnight and they're in the shower and they can tap, they don't need me. So that's why I teach kids in schools. So there's basically nobody who can't do it. And you can even do it for a kid that's even too young to do it.
And for those who are listening who aren't too familiar with EFT and the tapping, and when you're tapping, you're what? Touching, impacting the meridians of the body,
Yes.
the energies?
So right. The meridians are running throughout the body and they carry energy and information, mostly about emotion. And when you tap on them, it's sort of like um, opening up a tube or something like that, letting out the energy, right? So when you tap, you're releasing little bits of energy, which actually is retraining the nervous system to calm down because here's what we know. When we experience trauma, it's a state of overwhelm. And when we are in that state of overwhelm, we need to calm down, right? And this actually, because you're touching the body, you're tapping on a meridian point, which actually is really helpful because it helps to release the energy. But what it does is it takes that neural network that's in the brain and it deactivates it, because it's saying, hold on a second, we were freaking out, we were feeling overwhelmed, and now we're feeling calm. This is a dangerous network to be running because it's
Mm-hmm.
incongruent. So it then will make a new neural network, which is why I say you see the world differently, because you literally are changing the structure of your brain and how it responds by calming down the nervous system.
Wow.
And when we
That's
talk, so I know it's amazing. I know that's why I talk about it all the time. I found it in 2016. I had heard about it years before, but I actually heard the science of it, and that's what sold me. I mean, it's been studied for over 22 years. They call it emergency um, uh, first aid, for like emotional first aid. It's so
what
helpful for PTSD, anxiety, depression, weight loss, test taking, you name it. It really helps. Cravings, 74% decrease in cravings. Each one of these things is not just small. These are massive changes that you can experience in 1 hour of tapping. And you're talking about your feelings. The more that you tune into your feelings and the more that you honor the body, the more that the body is willing to work with you and let go of it. It's a lot of times it just needs to know that you're upset and that
mm-hmm.
this is stored in there and it's ready to go. It just needs to come back to your awareness. Oh, the other thing. So when we experience overwhelm, there's so much going on that the brain says snapshot and emotion, and they separate them. And until we understand what to do with them, they're kind of just like up there and suspended. When we start tapping and talking, we reunite them and then we can release them.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
So do you primarily work with people with tapping as a modality?
Yes. However, I'm the whole time using my energetic skills, my psychic skills. You don't have to have these abilities, but a lot of people call it the triple fast forward way of getting through the energy and information, because I can see it. I know where to go. But
Mm.
when you are on your own and you're doing tapping, you can just tap and talk and work your way through everything. You don't have to have any special abilities.
As an aside, what is your take on psychics, on people who, you know, there are a few celebrity psychics I'm thinking of right now who are on TV who meet with people and they read them. What
Mhm.
is your take on that?
It depends on the person. I mean, there are a lot of really good ones. And then there are always, charlatans, people who are impersonating or whatever, somebody who actually has these skills. But I, I personally, I find that what I do is like the most healing. The reason why I say that is because if somebody has somebody who has crossed over and they have valuable information for my client, I will deliver that and that's it. And then we move on. It's just merely to help them heal.
Sure.
I don't spend a lot of time on it. I'll give them a few pieces of information to make them know that it's that person. And then they can take a deep breath and they can say, okay, I now feel comfortable and that like that person's okay. I can move on to the next thing that's part of this story. Like here's an example of what would happen and what has happened. I was working with somebody and she wanted to leave her job to start a new job. And this job would be following her passion. And she was feeling very stuck. And I'm working with her and I tune into it. And her grandfather comes through. And I'm like, that's weird. Why would he be showing up? And so I start finding out that he left his job to start this carpet business in New York City, where he was super happy to be doing it. And then it had a fire and he lost everything. And then his health declined. That was the other thing that she was worried about. She was worried about losing her health.
Mm.
So by getting the information from her past, from her grandfather, which was actually stored in her body, I was able to help her release it and know that she's not going to have a fire in her house or her new job isn't going to burn to the ground and she's not going to lose her health. It was just her DNA, her cells, her body, remembering her past, which is, passed on to us. I don't know if you are familiar with this, but we can carry up to 70 generations worth of information to keep us alive, right? It's all in there. It's either a maladaptive behavior and then it goes, or it stays, and so this actually was maladaptive because it was keeping her from stepping into her power, stepping into her purpose. So we let it go. We're able to rewrite it.
When this topic comes up of energy and energy healing and being an empath like you are and the way you work, there are some who say, well, we all have this ability.
We do.
We all have, well, yeah, but not all of us are able to do this. So what is your response to that?
Everybody can play basketball, but not everybody's like Michael Jordan. So, Michael Jordan put the time and effort in, and I have definitely put the time and effort in. I mean, I am obsessed with this stuff. I'm obsessed with transformation. I'm obsessed with understanding what's happening. I am obsessed with helping people get to the next level and maximizing the energy of the body, the mind, the body, the spirit, but not everybody's like that. And so people come to me because I'm able to help them where they're at. Like I have a podcast, the Stark Transformation Show. So I have lots of information there. I have over 100 blogs. I'm writing a book right now. There's lots of information that's out there that's all free so that people can transform their lives. They don't necessarily have to come to me for a healing or anything. In fact, that's becoming less and less because I'd rather reach more people than sit behind. Usually my clients are worldwide, so I can work with them just right through here, which is going to blow your mind because it's part of the quantum field. But I could read your energy right now if you were wanting me to, not to say
yes.
If you had something you wanted to work on, we could do it right now. I do it all the time for podcasts and summits and things like that. But it's you would have to come to me with a problem, and then what I do is I help you to move through it. That's what I do, and that retrain your brain and body so that you can show up in a different way.
Awesome. Very intense, Amy.
I know. I'm sorry.
I love it. No, it's amazing. I really value the work you're doing. I mean, I totally believe in what you're doing. I mean, I think it's awesome. All right. So you mentioned your podcast. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
So I have a website. It's starktransformation.com. So you can find me on all social media platforms under that name, Stark Transformation. Stark's my last name.
Okay.
And I've always been obsessed with transformation. And you really do have a stark transformation in, when you do the things that I teach.
And your podcast is the
Stark Transformation Show.
The Stark Transformation Show. Awesome.
Yeah. And there's actually live healings that I do on that podcast as well. And yeah, there's lots of great information.
Awesome. Okay. We'll have those linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Amy, you're awesome. Love to have you back. Sincerely. Love to have you back at a later time. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having me. This was a pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Bye.